Head coach from 1970 to 77 and 1984 and 1988. In the 6 football seasons prior to coming to Fruitport, the Trojans have won just 10 football games at all levels. All told, Coach Holden compiled a 57-12-3 record during the 1970 to 77 seasons, including 6 league titles and 2 9-0 seasons. He returned to FHS in '84 and rebuilt the program following the cancellation of sports in '78. Here is more on Mr. Tom Holden.
Well, the first challenge when we got there is that they had probably won 1 game a year for maybe 5 or 6 years. And that was a difficult task. Our big thing where we had the kids get out of school to come and talk to the new football coach, we had 18 kids show up. And I know at Fruitport, if you could get out of class and go down to the thing and talk about something, they'd do it. So that was a concern. And so what we had to do is go out through the community and visit houses and get to the people so that we could get enough kids out. And then what we did is we worked with the parents and the different stuff and got to know them, and we kept those people. And as far as the kids, that changed it because we got the numbers then. And then the thing we had to do is to put a weight program in the high school. And it wasn't fancy weights. I mean, we got all of our weights from Johnson Boiler Company. We had the people drill the holes in them, and we got the bars that came out. But we had probably 30 sets of weights, and we could get a class full of 55 to 60 kids. Some of our PE classes were up to 55 to 60 kids.
Begged for anything he could get as far as weight equipment. He put in a whirlpool for injuries. He worked hard to get those things in place so that he knew that those would be tools that he would need to have his team succeed.
These kids busted their butts on that machine. They were huge. They were big guys anyway, and they all were a lot stronger, and it showed on the field.
Coaches have different impacts on players, and everybody has their own story. But for me, it was one of those where he challenged me to be better than what I thought I could be. To this day, I'm very thankful for that. But we had a great coaching staff. He surrounded himself with great guys, from Mark Hebb to Terry Westcott, Pat Westcott, Steve Schrackman, Gary Jarvie, guys like that I was surrounded with, including Coach. But he had a knack of pulling the best out of his players. And the other thing that he did that was unique is it didn't matter what your background was, what talents you had. He found a slot for you on the team.
He knew he had athletes, and he knew how to use them, and he knew where to put them. And that's the biggest part of, a big part of being a successful coach is being able to use your athletes in the right place. And he was very good at that, you know. And the people like Pat Westcott, who were the first guys that Tom's first year, I mean, they won a Seaway Conference championship his first year. Come back his second year, they're undefeated, and we're sophomores, right? And the whole program from varsity to freshman is an undefeated program. His second year here wins the second Seaway Conference. We have 9 wins streak going on. We come in as juniors and we extend that to 18 wins and win another Seaway Conference championship. And then, of course, our senior year, we extended that streak to 22 games before that Puffer game that we lost in mid-season. And his comment after that game was, well, we start a new string tomorrow, you know? I mean, it's kind of the mentality.
Before the first game or first scrimmage, he told me that he's kind of low-key out there. Well, but he's the opposite of low-key. He jumped in the air, I think, about 2 feet for the first 2 years when there was a touchdown.
Intense guy on the sidelines during the game. He would have a habit of chewing grass during the game. So as the game wore on, the greener his teeth got. So it was always.
He kicked me out of practice. And to this day, Coach, I'm wondering why you kicked me out of practice. And at the time, you said I was the only one you ever had to kick out of practice. But that made a dent, and it made a positive dent, because what it showed me is that I wasn't above anybody else. And what it showed the players that, hey, this guy, I'm going to kick his tail out of here too if he screws up. And it happened.
We're always in charge, but yet I don't think any kid wanted to miss 1 minute of a practice. We all wanted to be there. It was great fun.
We even had kids come out, and our field was in terrible shape that first year, and we went out and got sod and worked in the summer and laid that, and finally talked the people into putting in underground sprinkling. We didn't put that in, but put that in, and then it made a pretty nice field. And then our visiting bleachers were terrible. And so what we found out, I found out that Muskegon Heights was going to build a new football field. The government was going to give them a nice substantial amount of money, and they put it in the football field. So I got Lapo's trucks, and we went over and got the the home bleachers from Muskegon Heights. We put it on Lapo's trucks and drove them back to Fruitport, poured the concrete in the visiting side over there, and those are Muskegon Heights bleachers.
There are a few memories of Tom. You know, Tom was a former college player, former college coach, and came to Fruitport at a relatively young age, late 20s, and we were not far behind that when we played for him, so he could relate to us. But he had some special quirks that he had. One of them being a Southern Illinois boy, he had some crazy statements like, "Boys, the hawk is out." You know, like people from Fruitport don't really know what that means, right? But it means it's cold outside. We're going, oh, okay, coach, you know, whatever.
We taught sixth grade together for 20 years in the middle school, so right across the hall. I would say that we talked about football 30% and math and writing and school about 70%. I learned a lot from him. You know, as a teacher, he's always coming across the hall or saying, "Come in here a minute," and "What do you think of this?" Some student had explained how to solve a problem, and he hadn't thought of it that way. And so he'd want me to hear that. So we were always talking about how can we teach fractions better? How could we get better scores on the math? And since he had the advanced groups, he was pretty concerned with that. Most of the kids did real well.
You got to know the kids by being in that way program all year. So in effect, we were more like counselors. We knew what was going on in the homes. We knew what was going on outside the homes, okay? And we could get to them right away. And we also knew what their grades were.
Sometimes kids from the high school would say, I'm having a little trouble with this in Algebra 2 or something. Could I get a little help? And he'd say, well, I'm not going home just yet. So
his commitment to getting guys to play at the next level if they really wanted to. You know, there was some great athletes that came through Fruitport that never had an opportunity in the 60s at the football level to move on to the next level at the college level to play. And Tom was really adamant about working with college coaches to try to get those guys to take a look at, you know, what we had here and the athletes that we had.
You know, you're in here because of the kids. I mean, you know, they're the ones that really played the game. We had things to do with the game, okay, but they were the ones that played out there. And so I think it's an honor to them too, that you know, that they were good enough that you could become a successful coach.
In true coach fashion, he already has his yellow notepad ready to go and his pen. Please help me welcome Tom Holden.
Okay.
Well, whoever did that film just took my speech away. So as you can see right here, I scratched a bunch of that off. So I won't try to keep you very long. I was fortunate enough to coach at Central Michigan University after I played at Illinois State. And Roy Kramer, who was the head coach at the time, got a call from Gene Randall, and he needed a football coach. And Coach Kramer recommended me, and we set up a meeting with my wife and I think in about 2 weeks we went over to interview with Gene Randall, the superintendent. And I told him, I said, could you have the kids ready, I'd like to talk to him. And he had told me, because by the way, Roy Kramer ended up being the athletic director at Vanderbilt, was the commissioner of the Southeast Conference, and he's the person that started the Bowl Championship Series. So he was a very, very fine coach and a very, very smart individual, and I was fortunate enough to be there. But as I went over, we got in and we had an interview with Mr. Randall, and that went pretty well. And he offered me the job. And I talked to Roy, and he says, he says, they haven't done very well. But he says, I was the head football coach at Benton Harbor before he went to East Lansing and then to Central Michigan. And he says, I think the kids there, a lot of those kids came from Muskegon Heights, Muskegon, and Grand Haven. And he said, you ought to have some pretty good kids there. And he said, you might want to take the job. So Barb and I went over. I don't know why I wrote this note. I'm talking now. We went over there and met with Mr. Randall, and Barb went because she was a very, very fine honors English teacher there. And he offered us the job, and then I told him, I said, I want to come back in 2 or 3 days because I had to go down to Battle Creek for a clinic, and I would like to talk to the kids. He said, that's fine. Well, I went down to the Battle Creek Clinic and sat at a table because we had to do that at Central. We went to all the clinics so we could, let the school come out to its forefront. And I'm sitting there at a table, and I had 2 gentlemen. One was an assistant coach at Central, and 2 other guys. And one small, wasn't very big, but he was sitting there, and this other coach that was an assistant started talking about how he was going to take the basketball job at Battle Creek Central. And at that time, Battle Creek had won, they were about 500, and if you know anything about Battle Creek Central, that was a pretty good job. And he started talking about how he was going to do this and how he was going to do that, and he was really kind of bragging a lot. Well, the gentleman sitting next to me was sitting there, and he says, the guy was finished, and he says, Michael, he says, do you know where Harvard Street is? He said, no, why should I know that? He said, well, 3 of your best basketball players come from there. And I kind of was impressed with him, and I said, I really don't know you, but he says, I'm Will Robinson. Now, if any of you know who Will Robinson was, he was the famous coach, probably the best basketball coach from Detroit, Cass Tech, and Pershing. He would coach at Cass Tech first, and then he was at Pershing. That really stuck with me. So when I got the Fruitport job, I figured I better know where Apple Avenue was. German all over out Mill Iron. We had a few kids from Mill Iron there. Where's Linda at? Yeah. You know where Mill Iron is, don't you? It's where Fuzzy was and the Lucy. So we got these streets together and we had our meeting and went in there, and about 13 kids showed up. Now, at Fruitport, if you could get out of school to go to a meeting, for any kind of meeting, right, Ed, Pat, they're going to go. You may lose your whole class. Look, everybody's shaking their hands, so you know that. And so we thought, yeah, and I went back and I talked to, I remember what Will Robinson said, you better know your kids and you better get them out. And I went back and I talked to Bill Odekirk, who was the assistant at the time, and he says, why are you complaining? He says, that's a good job, why don't you go to work? I didn't get a lot of sympathy up at Central. And so we took the job and we came back and I had our first meeting, and I said, we've got a problem. And I said, what we need to do is we need to go out and visit the houses. So we had the 18 kids come back. They ended up about 22, and I had them, I think Pat will remember this, I had them put give me 5 kids on a card who you think can play football for us. And they went ahead and went around and got it. So we got the names, and then what we did is we found out where the addresses were. And you know, there was a couple of good ones at Mill Iron. Were some of the other streets. I'll just leave it with that and not talk too long, but there were some good kids all over, so we went to these streets. I didn't know where any of these streets were. And so I started driving around the district and found out this is a pretty darn big district. And so we were getting kids on Maple Island, we were getting them at Mill Iron, we were getting them out at Shetler, and we finally got them all together, and we ended up with 37 kids, let's see, I think on the varsity, we ended up with close to 50 on the JVs, and we ended up with 52 on the freshmen, and we ended up about 60 at junior high. And I thought, this is going to work. And so what we did is we kept them on the teams, and we had a really good first year. We were lucky. We had a very good tailback, and we had a good quarterback. We had a good line. Actually, our tailback was pretty good because he got beat up a lot of those games, and we kind of give him the football. And I know Phil Rogers was his blocking back, and we were fortunate enough to win the Seaway Conference at that particular time. And from then on, we had to have a weight program, and we didn't have any money at Fruitport. We didn't waste money at that school, regardless of what some people thought. It was really tight with the money, and so I had to get a weight room. And so what I did is went to Johnson Boilers over in Spring Lake. No, is that Spring Lake or Ferrysburg? Ferrysburg. And I forget the guy's name, but he helped me. When you cut boilers out, you cut these big holes in them, and there's different types of holes in all the boilers. And so I said, do you have any of those boiler holes? And he says, yeah, there's a bunch of junk back there by the railroad track there at Ferrysburg. I said, could we have them? And he said, yeah. And I said, we had gotten a car, and it wasn't a real good car. And I took it over there, and we started putting these boiler plates in there. And we took them back to Fruitport. And I said, I saw some, they called it wire in Johnson Boilers, but it was steel about this big. And I said, can we have that junk that you got out there? Because some of it was rusted. He said, sure, take all you want. So we put that in there. And then we took it down to the shop and had them drilled. Well, I said, how many of these things? As many as you can make. And we spray painted them gray and put weights on them. And that was our weight program. We had a little problem with benches, so we went to the industrial arts program. And I said, I need 15 benches. He said, what do you need them for? I said, we're going to start a sports skills class here. And so they made those, and then we came back, and then the second thing that we had to do is we had to get the way they would have their classes at the beginning of the year. And I said, well, I think we need a special class. I said, actually, we need a special 3 classes. They're called sports skills, because I had recruited at Central, and I knew that Saginaw, Arthur Hill, Midland High School, Bay City Central had these classes. At that time, there was a little problem with the counseling staff. Well, we kind of got that fixed. I had to go over and talk to the superintendent about that, and didn't make me a real friend at first, but they did help out and got everything in there, so we got the kids that were out for athletics into that class. Mostly football players the first year. I will tell you this though, it ended up being a really good class because then I could teach it. I taught those 3, and we worked really hard with the kids, and then I had 2 other classes that I taught, and it ended up helping the program off. The other thing that happened is we were doing things at that particular time that other schools hadn't done because they thought weightlifting might hurt their, all that stuff. We opened it up to the girls the 3rd year, and that was the best thing I ever did. Because we opened up to the girls, the guys thought that was great. The The only problem with it, but I don't mean to be this weird, is I made sure that the girls were spotting the girls on the bench press. Because we had a lot of guys that wanted to do that, and I said, no, we're not going to do that, and you had to be in that class the whole time. I know everybody in Fruitport understands that. And so we got them going, and then our girls got really strong, did exceptionally well in softball and basketball, and we got the program going really well. And that's kind of how we built our program. We were sound coaches. It might have been boring. When you got guys like Damath and Hall and you know, the little knocker too, I'm not going to leave you out, okay? Put him at guard. So we could move the football on people, and we did, and we didn't make mistakes. And I know some people, we had huge crowds, and I knew what was going to happen. After about the third year, I had, where's Linda? Fuzzy Hall, her dad used to come up to me after every game and, you know, congratulate and everything. And then he says, you know, he says, we got to get a little more complicated on this offense. I said, okay, Ralph. And then we never did. But yeah, well, there goes my notes. I had a really nice thing written out, and I'm on a roll now, so you let me know when I've gone too many times. But we got our kids in, and we started getting recruits coming in, and they would see the weight program, and they would see the different stuff, and they started offering kids scholarships, and we ended up in really good shape. Now, because we ran the ball so much, it made people like Rocky back there upset, because he always fancied himself as a wide receiver to go down, and I said, Rocky, you got to block. And so he was out there blocking and everything going, and I apologize for that, Rock. If you'd have had my son over there doing it, he'd have thrown the darn ball up to you all the time. Okay, I coached with him, and that was really hard for me to do. I said, well, why are we passing? And you know, yeah. But anyhow, that's where we ended up, and we had a lot of really good kids. We worked hard, and we were successful the first year because we had a pretty darn good tailback that got hit a lot. And you know, his mom was pretty good. She was from Oklahoma. She understood getting hit like that. And his dad was from Muskegon, and he was a baseball player in the minor leagues, and he kind of understood that, but he knew that Pat liked baseball too. And so he was a little bit worried, but he came around. So we really had good support from our fans, and it was absolutely an honor and a pleasure to coach these guys. I have no idea why I wrote these notes. And I'd like to know where Rex is.
Right here.
Oh my gosh, stand up, Rex. Rex was an all-state football player for us, a center. Larry Hall's not here, but Linda is, and he's with the Lees, who also had a lot of good kids. And so all of those families were together, and Bill Sanders, we called him the Colonel. And heck, Ed, you already got, I'm not going to talk about you. But we had a really good, Denny, yeah. We missed a few of our kids that passed away. We had a really good kid, Mark Lee. Steve Srackman passed away. And I had another kid that I'm going to talk about just for a minute, and then I'm going to let all of us go. Is that okay? Can I have just a little bit more? Yep. We had some Big Ten football players there in that league, and we even had one before we dropped football that ended up going to Catholic and playing for Michigan, Brian Holden, and that's when we dropped all athletics. But we really worked hard at getting those kids ready, and when they went, they were prepared when they went to school. We started getting Big Ten coaches coming in on a regular basis to the phys ed class, and that was really nice. And so we even got Muskegon lifting weights. They probably didn't have to lift weights. They had pretty good kids over there, but they started it too. And it was a real honor to coach those kids. We didn't take a lot of credit for anything because it was a team. Denny Whiteman will tell you that. It was about the team, and that's where we were. So it was very nice, and I thank you all very much, and really treasure this, and you guys had a good night tonight. Thank you.
We'll make this wait for a quick.
Oh, okay.